I had always prided myself on being capable, the kind of human who could handle anything a frontier colony threw at him. Today, I was reminded just how overrated that belief was. My boots squeaked against the smooth metal floors of the abandoned research facility, which smelled faintly of burnt circuits and something sweet, like synthetic honey gone bad. I was late for the inspection, my bag was full of gadgets I didn't need, and I had already tripped over my own backpack twice. But then came the sound that made me freeze mid-step, a high-pitched whine, sharp and persistent, like a distressed animal caught in a trap. I frowned. Most of the facility's inhabitants had been evacuated weeks ago. There shouldn't be anything living here. Yet the sound continued, growing louder, desperate, almost pleading. My curiosity got the better of my common sense. I followed the noise, ducking under dangling wires and stepping over spilled fluids that glimmered like liquid gems under the overhead lights. Then I saw her. Trapped in a half-collapsed containment cage, her ears flicked back nervously, her tails curled tight around her body, and her glowing eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me reconsider every life choice that had brought me here. She was beautiful in a way humans hadn't evolved to fully appreciate, slender, agile, with fur that shimmered in shifting shades of copper and midnight, tipped with silver like starlight. But beauty aside, she was very clearly trapped, and apparently very aware that I was now her only hope. Hi! I ventured, stepping closer, only to step on a loose panel that clanged loudly. Her head jerked in my direction, ears flattening in irritation, tails lashing. She yipped, a sound that sent a jolt through my spine. Great. First human panic, now alien panic. My brain scrambled for solutions. My hands fumbled with the tool kit on my belt, dropping a multi-tool on the floor with a loud clatter. She gave a sound somewhere between a snort and a laugh, or maybe it was a warning. Either way, it was loud and it made me panic more. I leaned down to unlock the cage, trying not to think about the fact that I had no idea how this mechanism worked. Fingers trembling, I pressed buttons, twisted levers, cursed in half a dozen languages, and finally, with a reluctant hiss and click, the cage door swung open. The foxwoman didn't immediately move. She just sat there, chest heaving, tail flicking in irritation, staring at me like I had personally insulted her entire species. Then came the words. Well, sounds at first, high-pitched syllables that made my ears ache, but slowly, as if she realized I needed a translation, the meaning became clear. You chosen to breed my kind. I froze. Literally froze. My brain attempted to process the statement, running through possibilities. Did she mean literally? Did she mean metaphorically? Was this some kind of test, or was she just incredibly dramatic? What? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. She blinked at me, clearly impatient, her tails flicking with a rhythm that suggested annoyance, or maybe exasperation at my lack of comprehension. You. Human. Chosen. Breed. Lineage. Save, she said in a clipped, staccato rhythm. Not exactly subtle, but effective. I tried to back away slightly, which only made her perk up, ears twitching. I don't think that's how it works, I said, swallowing nervously. She stared at me, tilting her head, and I got the distinct impression that whatever cultural or biological significance this breeding carried, she expected compliance. And also, I might be the only one capable of understanding her species' oddly specific requirement. At that moment, a part of me realized humans had a reputation for being resourceful, clever, and entirely unpredictable, and apparently, those qualities were exactly what this foxwoman needed. The thought was both reassuring and terrifying. I had never been chosen for anything so pivotal. And yet, the sheer absurdity of the situation made it difficult to feel heroic. Mostly, I just wanted to survive the next 10 minutes without embarrassing myself further. She stepped forward, fluid and graceful, tails moving like synchronized metronomes, and I nearly tripped over my own boot. I gestured vaguely, hoping my human charm, or sheer confusion, would somehow convey goodwill. she hissed softly, which could have been approval or warning. I couldn't tell. The fact that I had no clue about alien etiquette was rapidly becoming a problem. You see, she said, her voice melodic but firm, your species, unpredictable. But that is why you were chosen. Only a human can awaken what is dormant in us. Only a human can breed the lineage forward. I blinked. Slowly, very slowly, my mind connected some dot. Breed, I repeated, and she nodded, eyes sparkling. Like, continue the species? I asked cautiously, half hoping that I had somehow gotten it right without embarrassing myself. She flicked her ears, a gesture I eventually realized meant something between affirmation and impatience. Humor struck me, even in this moment of potential cosmic responsibility. Here I was, standing in a crumbling lab on the edge of a human colony, rescuing an alien I didn't fully understand, who had just handed me the literal and metaphorical weight of her entire species. And the first thing I thought of was how badly I'd need coffee after this. Okay, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I guess we start with figuring out what you actually need me to do? My hands gestured vaguely, and she blinked, then tilted her head, clearly unimpressed by my human fumbling. She yipped again, this time more impatiently, and I noticed the subtle twitch of her ears and flick of her tails. It was almost as if she was trying to say, "Hurry up, human. You have work to do." And that's when I realized just how alien her expectations of heroism were. In her mind, a human was supposed to be capable, decisive, and impressive. In reality, I was a clumsy, over-caffeinated mess with no plan and too many nerve. Yet somehow that mattered. The foxwoman stared at me as if she could see potential I hadn't seen in myself. Perhaps humans really were different, unpredictable, illogical, and yet astonishingly capable. Perhaps that was exactly what she needed. Perhaps, in some absurd twist of cosmic design, my flaws were precisely the qualities that would save her species. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The implications of her statement weighed heavily on me, but humor bubbled up despite my fear. After all, who gets chosen to breed an alien species as part of a daily routine? Only in my life could something like this happen. And if I survived, it would make for one hell of a story. She stepped closer again, glancing at me with something that might have been expectation or mischief, or both. I tried to mimic her stance, which ended in me nearly falling backward over a loose panel. She yipped sharply, and I realized two things at once. First, humans really were a sight to behold when panicked. Second, she had zero intention of letting me off the hook. And that, as far as I could tell, was just the beginning. The foxwoman had barely caught her breath before she launched into what she apparently considered a necessary orientation for humans. I listened, or tried to, while she flicked her tails with precision, leapt onto nearby surfaces with impossible grace, and gestured to a set of strange devices that made my brain hurt. My initial thought was that she was teaching me her culture, but then I realized every move had a purpose. Some test, some ritual, some twisted human-alien logic I could barely comprehend. "You must learn to align," she said, tilting her head, "and ensure the continuation of the lineage through proper synchronization." Her words were deliberate, almost musical, and entirely terrifying. I nodded, unsure whether I was agreeing to help save her species or signing up for some elaborate alien athletic program. I tried to mimic her posture, raising my arms stiffly, only to topple over onto a low console. She yipped sharply, ears twitching, and I hastily picked myself up, blushing. This was going to be more complicated than I thought. She began explaining a series of tests: physical agility, mental acuity, and something she called bond alignment exercises. My human brain translated that loosely into jump through hoops and hope she doesn't notice you're a disaster. And true to form, the moment I attempted the first step, I tripped on a stray wire, launching myself face-first into a pile of alien tools. She yipped again, though this time it sounded almost like laughter. I was mortified. Here I was, the supposedly clever human, chosen to continue her kind, utterly failing at basic coordination. Yet somehow, each mistake seemed to intrigue her more than frighten her. She tilted her head, watching me with those piercing eyes, and I began to suspect she was testing more than my physical skills. Perhaps she was gauging my adaptability, my creativity, my sheer capacity for chaos. And humans, I thought bitterly, excel at chaos. The mental tests were even worse. She presented symbols, glowing and shifting in ways that made my brain ache. I stared at them, tried to memorize patterns, and eventually gave up, realizing I had no hope of matching her expectations through logic alone. So I improvised. I pointed, I guessed, I made sound effects, and to my astonishment, she nodded. Apparently, humans were unpredictably brilliant in ways her species didn't anticipate. I was beginning to see the appeal. At some point, she began explaining the bonding protocol, and my pulse quickened. She used phrases like connect our lineages, share the essence, and pass on what is unique, all delivered with the melodrama only a foxwoman could achieve. My mind, predictably, went to the worst possible conclusions, imagining scenarios that made me sweat and stammer. She flicked her ears at me, clearly aware of my thoughts, and I realized she was having the time of her life teasing me. Yet beneath the teasing there was method. She demonstrated, using her tails, gestures, and glowing markings, how humans could activate latent potential in her kind. It wasn't just about procreation. It was about unlocking something fundamental, something biological and magical all at once. And somehow, despite my clumsiness, I was capable of it. The absurdity of it all didn't escape me. Only humans, with our illogical, improvisational thinking, could succeed where more precise alien minds might fail. Lunch happened somewhere in the middle, though it didn't feel like lunch. I had sandwiches, she had something that shimmered like liquid crystal and smelled faintly of citrus and ozone. She watched me eat with fascination, as if my choice to chew slowly, poorly, and messily was an important piece of research. I tried not to knock over her food with my elbows, which, predictably, failed. She yipped in amusement, and I realized that whatever this bonding process involved, it also involved a lot of patience, observation, and humor. Her tests became progressively more elaborate. At one point, she had me attempt a balance exercise on floating platforms that hovered a few inches above the ground. I staggered, nearly fell, and grabbed her arm for stability. She twitched, yipped, and then, surprisingly, seemed delighted. Apparently, human clumsiness was part of the charm. The word breed echoed in my mind again, layered with meaning I wasn't fully prepared to process. Somehow, my mistakes were contributing to her species' future. Somehow, my fumbling hands and panicked brain were vital. The double entendre of every instruction was impossible to ignore. Every phrase she used seemed to carry two meanings, one scientific, one intimate. I found myself blushing, stammering, and overthinking, while she observed with an amused, knowing gaze. Her humor was subtle, teasing, and precise. She seemed to enjoy watching me wrestle with language, comprehension, and bodily coordination all at once. Every mistake made me more aware of her attention, and every correct move, however accidental, felt like a tiny victory. By the end of what I assumed was a full cycle of tests, I was exhausted, covered in alien fluids, bruised, and slightly singed from a minor electrical mishap involving a floating panel. Yet I had passed, barely. She yipped sharply, tails flicking with delight, and I realized she had just confirmed me as her chosen. I had no idea what that meant in practical terms, but the relief, and the absurd pride, was overwhelming. Humans, I realized, thrived in chaos. Our flaws, mistakes, and impulsive decisions could accomplish things that more methodical species might fail at entirely. My clumsiness had become a tool, my ignorance a weapon, and my humor a bridge. She studied me with a mixture of admiration and exasperation, clearly amused at my human idiosyncrasies while acknowledging their unexpected effectiveness. There was a moment of silence, the kind that makes your ears ring and your mind race simultaneously. She tilted her head, ears twitching, and I realized she was waiting for me to react, to understand what had just happened. I swallowed, tried to straighten my posture, and said, "I guess. I'm ready." The word sounded weak even to me, but she yipped sharply, a sound that clearly meant approval. And then she smiled, or at least, something approximating a smile in her alien features. Her tails flicked in a synchronized dance, her ears twitched in amusement, and for a brief moment, the overwhelming absurdity of being chosen to breed her kind became something almost manageable. I had survived the initiation, survived the tests, and somehow, through human unpredictability and sheer chaos, I had proven myself. The foxwoman yipped once more, leapt onto a nearby console with impossible grace, and gestured for me to follow. My heart raced, mind scrambled, and palms sweated. I knew the next steps would be equally absurd, equally challenging, and equally hilarious. Somehow, despite my panic, my failures, and my utter lack of preparation, I had earned her trust. Humans really were remarkable, she seemed to say, and for once, I felt the weight of that truth resting squarely on my shoulders. Just when I thought I might finally understand the foxwoman's logic, everything went sideways. A loud, mechanical roar echoed through the facility, shaking loose panels and rattling the lights overhead. I froze, caught between panic and the absurd realization that my day had officially escalated from save an alien to save an alien while potentially being hunted. She yipped sharply, ears flattening against her head, tails bristling like a flag in a storm. Whatever threat had arrived, she clearly expected me to act. And me, of course, expected nothing but chaos to follow. I grabbed the nearest tool I could think of, an old welding torch that smelled vaguely of burnt plastic, and raised it like a sword. She tilted her head, seemingly impressed but slightly incredulous. "Human weapons, primitive, yet effective in unexpected ways," she said, tails flicking with a mix of amusement and urgency. I wasn't sure if that was encouragement or a polite warning not to blow anything up. Knowing me, it would probably be both. The intruder revealed itself, a squad of robotic drones designed to capture any alien specimen. Their movements were precise, calculated, and terrifyingly efficient. My mind raced. There was no manual for this. No human handbook covered "fend off high-tech alien enforcers while maintaining your dignity." I knew instinctively that improvisation was my only option. My heart pounded, and I felt the familiar surge of human ingenuity, the ability to see opportunity where others saw chaos. I grabbed a pile of discarded cables and tossed them across the floor. The drones skidded on them, sparks flying. The foxwoman yipped, clearly impressed, though she flicked her ears as if to scold me for making a mess. I ducked behind a console, yanking levers at random. A panel shot open, releasing a cloud of sticky, iridescent gel that trapped two drones instantly. I had no idea it would work, but it did. She clapped, or as close to clapping as a foxwoman could manage, and I felt a surge of pride. Humans, messy, chaotic humans, could actually be effective. Human improvisation, incredible, she said, flicking her tails in what I interpreted as admiration. I wanted to argue that luck played a role, but the urgency of the moment left no time for modesty. One drone managed to disengage itself, rolling toward us with lethal intent. I grabbed a floating console and swung it like a bat. The drone spun, veered off course, and collided with another. Sparks flew. She yipped, a sound that conveyed both approval and mild disbelief at my complete lack of finesse. As we fought, her words came in sharp bursts, double-layered in meaning. "Handle my lineage with care," she instructed, her tone equal parts serious and teasing. I stumbled over the phrasing in my mind, wondering if she meant the literal continuation of her species, or some metaphorical genetic potential I was supposed to nurture. My blushing face gave her amusement, and I realized she was deliberately pushing me into a frenzy of embarrassment, keeping me alert. It worked. We moved in sync, though completely unplanned. My improvisation complemented her agility in ways neither of us expected. I tripped, she leapt, I cursed, she yipped. Somehow, it formed a rhythm that allowed us to push back the drones. I realized that chaos could be a kind of teamwork. Humans thrived in unpredictability, and she, for all her grace, relied on my mistakes to anticipate threats she couldn't predict herself. My flaws were turning into a strategic advantage, a fact I found both terrifying and hilarious. One particularly aggressive drone lunged at her, and without thinking, I shoved it into a pile of cables. Sparks flew, and it toppled backward into the gel trap I had earlier deployed. She yipped, tails flicking like fireworks, clearly delighted. "The human's mistakes are strangely effective," she said, eyes sparkling. I tried to hide my grin, realizing I had accidentally become the hero she expected. My clumsy hands, panicked reflexes, and impulsive ideas were saving her species. That thought should have been empowering, but the absurdity of it made me snicker despite the chaos. The battle escalated when a larger drone appeared, its size dwarfing the others. Its sensors locked onto her, and I felt a surge of responsibility I wasn't entirely prepared for. She stepped toward me, ears twitching, and in that instant I understood. She trusted me. Completely. It didn't matter that I had no plan, no skill, and no confidence. My human unpredictability, my flaws, were exactly what she needed. I grabbed a loose power conduit, swung it with all my might, and somehow managed to trip the massive drone, causing it to crash into a support beam. Sparks rained down, panels shook, and I realized we were somehow surviving. She yipped, clearly impressed, but also slightly exasperated. "Humans, impossible, yet effective," she said, her voice a mix of amusement and admiration. As the last drones were neutralized, I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. She landed beside me, tails curling around me in what felt like approval, though I wasn't entirely sure. The adrenaline surged, leaving my body shaking and my mind buzzing. I had survived, we had survived, and in the process, I had somehow demonstrated the value of human chaos, human improvisation, and human daring stupidity. She tilted her head, yipped sharply, and gestured for me to follow her further into the facility. My legs ached, my clothes were scorched, and my pride was in tatters, but I couldn't help but feel exhilarated. Humans were remarkable, she seemed to say. Flawed, messy, impulsive, but undeniably capable when it mattered most. And then she whispered, low and melodic, something that made my ears burn. "You truly are chosen to breed my kind." The words carried weight, double meaning, humor, and a promise of absurd responsibility. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my panicked thoughts, and realized I had no idea what "next steps" actually meant. I could only trust that my chaotic human brilliance would somehow carry us through. Somehow, I had passed the ultimate test. Survival under impossible circumstances, improvisation against logic-defying odds, and earning the trust of a species that had chosen me to carry forward their legacy. The absurdity of it all made me laugh, breathless and shaking, as she flicked her ears and tails in what could only be described as alien approval. Humans were ridiculous, brilliant, and strangely essential. I was just getting started. By the time we emerged from the chaos, I was covered in dust, sparks, and a thin layer of alien gel that smelled faintly like citrus and burnt ozone. The foxwoman regarded me with an expression that could only be described as triumph mixed with mischief, tails flicking in sync as if conducting some invisible orchestra. I was exhausted, my limbs trembling, and yet I couldn't help but feel a surge of absurd pride. Somehow, despite my complete lack of preparation and utter clumsiness, we had survived, neutralized the threat, and proven, against all odds, the worth of human improvisation. "You have done well," she said, her voice melodic, teasing, and dangerous all at once. "The lineage, the continuation, depends on you." Her words hit me with the double impact of gravity and humor. I blushed, trying to process what "depends on me" really meant. The human in me wanted to panic, the survivor in me wanted to analyze, and the ridiculous comedian in me wanted to make a joke about coffee, duct tape, and alien biology. None of it seemed appropriate, but somehow it made the moment more bearable. I managed a weak smile. "I did what I could," I said, gesturing vaguely at the smoking consoles, toppled panels, and sticky alien goo. She tilted her head, ears flicking in what I interpreted as both amusement and disbelief. "What you could," she repeated. Human modesty curious yet effective. "You surpassed expectation." Her praise was layered with teasing, double entendre, and an acknowledgement that humans were maddeningly unpredictable, and therefore invaluable. I tried to step forward with a semblance of dignity, which promptly failed when I tripped over a loose cable and fell face-first into the alien floor. She yipped sharply, tails curling in what was clearly delight at my clumsiness, and I realized she was enjoying this more than I was. Somehow, my human flaws weren't just tolerated, they were celebrated. Every stumble, every misstep, every overreaction was proof that humans, in all their messy glory, could accomplish things that meticulous alien logic could not. "You truly understand," she said, voice softer now, though still laced with amusement. "To breed, to pass forward, not merely survival, but essence. Only a human can grasp the unpredictable, the imperfect, the chaotic ways necessary to preserve what is unique." I blinked, realizing that my literal fumbling, my panicked improvisation, and my ridiculous mistakes had somehow achieved something profound. My head spun at the absurdity of being simultaneously mocked, celebrated, and entrusted with the fate of an alien species. She flicked her tails, and I noticed a subtle shift in her posture, less urgency, more playfulness. "Now, we celebrate alignment complete." I swallowed, heart racing, aware of the double meaning in her words. Was this literal, metaphorical, a test, or all three at once? I had no idea, but I knew one thing. My unpredictability had earned her trust, and my human flaws had become an asset in ways I could never have imagined. She moved closer, ears twitching in a rhythm I didn't understand, eyes gleaming with mischief. I attempted to mirror her posture, which resulted in me knocking over a small console. She yipped sharply, and I realized she found this hilarious. I laughed nervously, trying to regain some semblance of composure. Somehow, despite or because of my ineptitude, we had formed a connection, a bond forged through chaos, humor, and a shared understanding of the absurd. "You are essential," she said, voice low, melodic, and teasing all at once. "Chosen to continue the lineage, to breed, to bond, to pass forward that which cannot be replicated except through human influence." I choked on my own shock, blushing furiously. The double entendre was unmistakable, yet somehow elegantly scientific at the same time. I wanted to protest, to rationalize, to hide behind humor, but all attempts felt inadequate. I had been both chosen and mocked, revered and teased, and it was exactly what she intended. Her tails curled around me like a ribbon of approval, playful yet possessive. "Human," she said, voice lilting, "you are chaotic, foolish, brave, and unpredictable. Exactly what is required. Only a human could," she yipped, flicked her ears, and left the sentence unfinished, leaving me to imagine the most mortifying, hilarious possibilities. I groaned, simultaneously terrified and thrilled by the implication. Somehow, the fate of her species rested in hands that had no business handling anything more complicated than a coffee maker. I straightened, wiped alien goo from my face, and tried to sound confident. "I will do my best," I said, fully aware that best in human terms included mistakes, blunders, and improvisations that defied logic. She tilted her head, tails twitching, clearly satisfied with the statement. The fact that I was a messy, clumsy, panicked human had somehow become my greatest strength. The absurdity of it all was staggering, but I found a perverse comfort in it. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper that made my ears burn. "You are the bridge. The human influence. The chosen to breed the essence, the lineage, the uniqueness. I stammered, caught between embarrassment and awe, realizing that this was the culmination of every mistake, every stumble, and every panicked improvisation I had made. I was both ridiculous and heroic, awkward and essential, foolish and irreplaceable. I swallowed hard, attempting to regain composure, though my heart raced and my mind reeled. Humor surged, as it always did when faced with absurdity. "Well," I said, voice shaky but resolute, "if being ridiculous is part of the job, I think I'm overqualified." She yipped sharply, and I realized she appreciated the joke, or at least my attempt at humor. Somehow, in the midst of chaos, double entendre, and interspecies absurdity, we had reached equilibrium. She stepped back, ears twitching, tails flicking in satisfaction. The facility, once a chaotic mess of sparking drones, fallen consoles, and sticky alien gel, was quiet again. I stood there, exhausted, bewildered, and inexplicably proud. Somehow, humans, in all our clumsy, flawed glory, had proven indispensable. My mistakes, improvisations, and panicked brilliance had saved a species. And the foxwoman, elegant, teasing, and unpredictable, had made me understand the true weight and hilarity of being chosen to breed her kind. I exhaled, trying to steady my thoughts. Somehow, we had survived, bonded, and cemented the most absurd human-alien alliance imaginable. Her tails twitched again, her ears flicked, and she yipped sharply, clearly signaling some private, impossible-to-decipher approval. I laughed, heart racing, cheeks burning, and realized that for all the chaos, embarrassment, and double-meaning wordplay, this was exactly where I was meant to be. Humans, I thought, were ridiculous, brilliant, flawed, unpredictable, and undeniably necessary. Somehow, in the middle of alien chaos, adult implications, and absurd responsibility, I had become the chosen one. Chosen to improvise, chosen to stumble, chosen to laugh in the face of absurdity, and chosen to breed the lineage in ways that defied both logic and expectation. Somehow I survived, and somehow it worked perfectly. And as the foxwoman flicked her ears, tails curling in what I could only describe as smug triumph, I realized that the true miracle of humans wasn't skill, strength, or even courage. It was chaos, laughter, mistakes, and the ability to somehow turn every blunder into brilliance. Somehow, being human was exactly what was needed to save a species, and somehow I was the proof.